Refugee resettlement agencies receive now $1,000 per person to provide services for up to 5 years. One-time payment, $1,000. What did I get myself into? I had no idea. After about 4 months, I honestly thought I was going to go crazy myself and end up back in one of the group homes up in Green Bay. Because you heard the essays today, you heard the voice, you saw the faces. I was facing that every single day. I was overwhelmed with the work, with the lack of money, what was expected, and then the government comes and monitors you, and you have to have every single duck in a row and every piece of paper signed with the date and the signature. And I just would go home at night and cry. Also, within 3 or 4 months, my staff of 7 that were highly experienced, really good staff, I now had 3 because they needed a supervisor. And part of being a worker is that, you have to do the work according to American standards. So I ended up essentially rebuilding a team. But one night in March of 2010, I kind of had reached a breaking point. And I realized that if I didn't get a sense of hope, and if I didn't pull myself together, how could I ever help my clients? So, let's see if this works. So I like to call this what I wish I had known in 2009. Because this, as you've been hearing, this is so complex. You saw the flight of that woman last night on the film. How do you even begin to imagine doing what she did? And you heard the essays today. How do you even begin to work with people that have gone through that? And what I realized over that period of 4 months, and what I wish I had known in 2009, and what I continue to learn every single day, is that cultural competency is a myth. But cultural humility, you can learn something new every day. And that has a lot of hope to it. And it's also very healing. So I'm just going to start with a very short Refugee 101. What are refugees? We've talked about this today. 1, 2, 3. Immigrants leave one country, voluntarily choose to move to another one country. When they arrive here, they are not eligible for any rights or responsibilities. Well, you have to obey the law. But you are not eligible for any governmental programs for up to 5 years or until you attain citizenship. Asylees, as you know, 2 countries. They leave their home country voluntarily or sometimes by somewhat of force. They get to a second country, they go, can I please stay here? And that country will put them, in the United States, put them through a process in which they have to go through a legal process of stating why they need to be here, and the government has to approve it. Once they're approved or adjudicated by an immigration judge, they are now eligible for our services at Lutheran Social Services Refugee Resettlement. Refugees are quite different. They flee one country, go to a second country, such as Burma to Thailand. I can't go back to Burma, can I stay here? Yes, you can stay here for a while, but you can't stay forever. And if you're very, very lucky, you will become one of the few that are resettled in a third country, and that's what makes a refugee a refugee. That's why they should not be called refugees going into Europe, because they're actually just going from one country to another. It's a piece of legalese, but it is really important when you're speaking intentionally about these groups. America is a land of exceptions, you know that, in our language, of course, but refugees can also come directly out of Iraq and Afghanistan in acknowledgement of their service of material support to the U.S. military. So they can also be refugees out of Iraq and Afghanistan directly, but all others go through that third country process. We serve asylees and refugees only. We do not have a large immigration department. You have to have very deep pockets for that. It's also another whole service area. We know that there are agencies here in Milwaukee that have done asylum and immigration work for many, many years, but they don't do resettlement. That's not what they're experts in. We're a refugee resettlement agency. That's what we're experts in, but we don't do immigration. So we don't have to be the whole pie. And we don't have to be experts in everything, but we can do our piece the best that we can. So here's my elevator speech from March of 2010, when I kind of had my epiphany. People would say, Mary, what do you do? Well, about an hour later, I would get done talking. But it is. Refugee resettlement is a humanitarian effort between the U.S. government and the United Nations. This is our international expression of our democracy. And we're going to be I'm going to be referring back to that again and again. One thing that's really important to know, and it was touched on by Carolyn this morning too, is that there are about 1 million legal immigrants admitted to the United States every year. In fiscal year 2016, we admitted 85,000. So if there was over 1 million immigrants legally admitted and refugees were only 85,000, who are all these other people? These are anybody in immigration here? Mariana?
Yes.
You see J visas?
No.
Okay.
I will see H2A, H2B visas.
Okay. So there's employment visas, there's spousal visas, there's special skills visas. If you invest $500,000 into the United States and you hire 10 Americans for a period of 2 years, you can get yourself a permanent visa. If you have $200,000 and you open up a business in an extremely isolated area of the United States and employ 10 Americans for a period of 2 years, you got yourself a permanent visa. That's where the other 1 million minus 85,000 come from. So when people say immigrants, it's really important that you are distinguishing between immigrants, asylees, refugees. It is a completely different process, and the conversation can change quite a bit depending exactly who you're talking about. Now, LSS started doing organized refugee resettlement back in 1974, and since then, we have only served refugees and adjudicated asylees. If asylees come to us and they're in process, we are unable to serve them because they don't have permanent legal status yet in the United States. But we do have places to refer them to. The journey to become a refugee, as you know, is not easy. People have to go through multiple interviews. Like, let's say that a Somali person has fled to Kenya and they're in a camp. Let's say, I'm going to use my family as an example. Wife, husband, 2 children. They will bring the family in, they'll sit down and they'll do an interview with the family. They might tell them to come back in a week. They'll take the parents separate and the children separate and they'll interview 2 and 2. Your stories better match. They might tell you to come back 6 months later. They'll interview you separately, 4 interviews. Your stories better match. And if they don't, they can close your case and deny you refugee status. They might interview you and have you come back a year later. They might interview you and have you come back 3 years later. Your stories have to match. This is not an easy process. And if you pass the interview, you then go into a security process. If you have been put on the list for the United States, that security process takes anywhere from 24 to 36 months. So the Syrians that we are beginning to see come to the United States fled back in 2011. That's how long it takes to get processed. And the UN is always hopeful that peace will break out and that people will be able to go back home. It's only when it is clear that that will never happen and people can never return home safely is when people are considered for resettlement in that third country. And that's why we're just beginning to see Syrians now from 2011, is because they were waiting 3 or 4 years to see what would happen. Once people are put on the list for the United States and they go through the 24 to 36 month process of, I almost said extreme vetting, extensive clearance and screening. Let me tell you how, I'll just give you one example of how extreme this is. Why do I keep saying that? Let's say that you know somebody that's already in Milwaukee. I'm the person in Milwaukee. I am now known as a U.S. tie. I am your U.S. tie to Milwaukee. You're still in Thailand in the camp. They put you on the list for the United States. You're completely screened, but I changed my phone number. Okay, we put put you on the travel list for Milwaukee. We're going to call your U.S. tie to make sure that they're still your U.S. tie. U.S. tie's phone number is changed. They do about 6 more months of background checks again. Even changing a phone number can have devastating effects on a case. Let's say you're in the screening process and you have a baby. They take you out of the line, they put you back, you have to interview again, where did this baby come from? They do some clearances again. So a lot of times people, they don't want to say what's going on. What if you get married? What if you're a teenager and you've been in a camp for 10 years and you get married? They remove you from your parents' case and you have to start all over as a new case. It's so thorough and so detailed. So let's go back. You get assigned to the U.S., they put you on the list, the U.S. says, yes, we will accept your security clearances, you can come to the U.S. The Department of State's Bureau of Population, Refugee, and Migration, that I'll now call PRM, will sit down at a table in Washington, D.C. with representatives of the 9 national agencies. I am a member of LIRS. Megan is a member of USCRI. Each of us have about 30 to 50 offices in the United States. That's upwards of 80 to 100 offices, right? Or, oh my math is bad, 60 to 80. LSS has got 2 offices, one in Milwaukee, one in Madison. So they will sit down and say, we have a Somali case. It's a free case, no U.S. tie. They can go anywhere in the United States. So they might give it to Catholic Charities in California. But what if it's a case that's a Somali and the U.S. tie lives in Milwaukee? Who has an affiliate in Milwaukee? There's 3 of us. Who is willing to take a single mom with 4 kids? LSS. It comes to us. That's how the process works. They can go through 1,000 people in a half an hour in Washington, D.C. Highly organized process, very streamlined. They know what they're doing at the national level. So let's take a brief look at some recent trends. In 2016, 85,000 refugees were admitted to the United States, so there's something called the presidential determination. The presidential determination for 2018 just came out. The president can raise the number or lower the number as he or she chooses. In 2016, the Congress put forth a presidential determination to President Obama's desk and said, we respectfully request 75,000 refugees in the fiscal year 2016. Obama said, no, I'm going to do 85,000. And 10,000 of them are earmarked for Syria. In 2017, we were projected to receive 110,000. Fiscal year starts October 1st. Because Obama once again said, I'm going to do another 25,000 earmarked for Syria. So it came to his desk, he upped the numbers. On January 27th of 2017, at 4:30 Central Time, on a Friday, our current president put out an executive order that changed things, not only for people in the United States, but it really sent shockwaves throughout the world because we are Lady Liberty, open doors, welcome, diversity. And he immediately decreased that number to 50,000. As I said, there's very thorough clearances and very thorough screenings. Someone once said to me, there's a whole lot easier way to get in the United States as a terrorist than through the refugee process. Because there's about 22.5 million registered refugees in the world, and only 50,000 are going to make it to the United States. How many of those do you think are terrorists? And I'm going to show you a very scary picture later of terrorists that we actually had come to the United States in our agency. So in 1979, 200,000 were admitted to the United States. How did we do it? Back then, refugee resettlement was very different. What they would do is that they didn't want to overwhelm any one congregation or any one city with a refugee. So back in those days, they would put a family, a Hmong family in Milwaukee, a Hmong family in Ashland, which is 5 hours from here, Green Bay, Wisconsin, Eau Claire, La Crosse, Mauston, Madison, but they found out that they didn't do very well. People had trouble integrating. They never, some people got sick, because they didn't have a chance to eat the food that their bodies were accustomed to. They never heard their own language, which is the language of your heart. People weren't doing well. So before I joined Resettlement, and I don't know exactly when it happened, but they started putting people into geographical boundary service areas. So if you have a U.S. tie who happens to live in Sheboygan, and they're coming through LSS. Sheboygan is about 60 miles away. I can resettle that case 60 miles away up in Sheboygan because we can settle a case with a U.S. tie within 100 miles of our office. If they're in Green Bay is 114 miles from where we're standing right now. We cannot resettle that case because it's 114 miles. Very strict. If they have a no U.S. tie, if they're free and can be resettled anywhere, they have to be within 50 miles of our office. So you can see that they kind of reined in that really large resettlement area, and they have people a little bit more concentrated, which did lead to Milwaukee having that great school system that you heard about earlier today. There's, they have critical mass. They've got funding to provide really focused services to refugee kids, and they're doing better. And employers also begin to see trends in refugees, and they begin to say, call us and say, hey, do you have any refugees that need jobs? Because we'd love to hire them, they're great workers. So that's what that does when you pull in those boundaries, and people can build a sense of community, stabilize, aspire, and move on. It's really a pretty good thing. So in Milwaukee and Madison, LSS has welcomed in the past 8 years since I've been there, Bhutanese, Burmese, and in Burma, every state has its own language, its own culture, its own ethnicity. So mostly we're seeing Burmese, mainstream Burmese. We are also seeing Burmese Karen, Chin, and Rohingya. We've also seen Mon and Shan and Karen. Ethiopians, Somali Bantu, and Somalis, which are two absolutely different populations. We've seen Congolese, Rwandan, Iraqi, Afghan, Syrian. If you only remember one slide, this is the one that I want you to remember. It's really important to know. Refugees arrive with permanent, legal, documented status for the rest of their life. The United States, however, does not admit people to the United States to not do well or to flaunt our laws. So there is cultural orientation, there's extended cultural orientation, and our doors are always open for up to 5 years for information and referral. We also do workshops, special training sessions with refugees, and if you're under 5 years of arrival, you are welcome to come to those because we want people to do well and understand the laws. People are immediately authorized for employment, and even more important, they are expected to work as soon as possible. We have people getting off the plane, when can I start working? They didn't have that opportunity in their homelands. Maybe they weren't of the ethnicity that was allowed to be in certain jobs. So people get very excited at the wide open opportunity of the United States, but sometimes we have too much opportunity, too much choice, and that's overwhelming as well. Refugees arrive wherever they land and wherever they move to. They have all the rights and responsibilities of any citizen of the United States that lives there. So let's say Wisconsin. You are eligible for all the benefits and programs that the state has to offer you. But you also have great responsibility. And then, of course, voting privileges are earned after passing citizenship at 5 years. Carolina talked about this morning. The goal of resettlement is self-sufficiency. Get a job, do well, pay taxes, live the American dream, buy your own home, know how to take the bus, drive a car with insurance and a valid driver's license, obey all the laws, learn English. Things that are expected of me and you are also expected of refugees. And sometimes you just have to take the refugee out. Just take the word out. How would you treat anybody else that you've come into contact that's overwhelmed by a difficult system, changing information, changing expectations, not quite understanding what's being said? This sounds like a tweet, doesn't it? It sounds like a presidential tweet. It comes out, it changes. It's not necessarily a language that I myself speak. That's what it's like for refugees as well. But take the refugee out. These people, as you saw in the film last night and you heard from those young women today, courageous, tenacious, brave. For Burmese cultures, it's very difficult to stand up and make eye contact and speak in front of a group. I cannot tell you how powerful that was for me today to see those young girls get up there and speak. That's just an incredible thing. So helping refugees also may not always be helpful. When they did the 200,000 and they had people with different churches, what churches did was adopt people. We simply can't do that anymore because people don't integrate really well. So what we've had a little bit more success doing is teaching. I will be your teacher as a volunteer for the next 6 months. And every time I see you, we're going to work on something. Now, a family from Afghanistan told me that they wish that they had somebody tell them that because they thought that these people were going to be their new friends. How do you stop being a friend? And do you plan on being their new friend for the rest of your life? But you can stop being a teacher. And when you're a teacher, people pay more attention, and you're also teaching them a lot of nice skills. I'm going to come at 1 o'clock and I'll work with you, or I'll spend time with you for 2 hours or 3 hours. And then you come on time and you leave on time, which teaches them work skills, how to be on time and how to leave on time. But then when you're done teaching, if you want to continue, you probably can if you want. But if you've kind of had it, because this is very consuming work and it's very overwhelming at times, you also have the opportunity to kind of move on yourself, refresh, recharge, and come back with a new family. And that's really an important thing. People have to be expected to live within their income. If you give them things and they can't sustain it on their own and something happens to you or you go away, that's going to be very difficult. They have to learn to live within the laws of their new home. And teaching them how things work here is really important. You're not telling them what not to do, you're telling them what to do. So all resettlement agencies in Wisconsin provide these things. This is basically a refugee charter. These are all required by the Department of State's PRM. We all have intensive welcome for 30 to 90 days is the official resettlement period. But then we also receive some additional funding from the Office of Refugee Resettlement for case management, more intensive up to 1 year, and then information and referral for up to 5 years. A refugee resettlement agency cannot close their doors to a refugee for 5 years, or you have to have a place that you can send them to. We help them get a job. We provide cultural orientation on an ongoing basis, and then sometimes we do those specialized workshops as well. We always have appointments to make time for you. But then we also have walk-in hours. Agencies sometimes are also able to provide emergency assistance with cash donations. You were asking what you can do. This is what you can do no matter where you live in the United States. Invite someone to come and speak to you like you are today for you to know more. Call a resettlement office. You can get it on the internet. You can call me or Megan after today. Ask your questions. We'll give you the best information you can. Speak up and speak out when people are talking about why do we have refugees here? Why not? Start a conversation. Donating cash in any amount right now, I have to tell you that I believe an ulterior motive of all of this stuff going on is to shut down resettlement agencies. If you shut down the resettlement agency, how can you welcome more refugees? We had capacity for 110,000 6 months ago. Many of them have shut down. If they continue to shrink us, they'll say, oh, well, we can't bring them here, there's nobody to serve them. Donate cash. Keep the resettlement agencies open, and that experienced staff on board will be good stewards of that money, but keep us open just out of spite. Get involved in helping. You talked about volunteering. Remember, time limited and boundaries are really going to be helpful for refugees. And then once again, just be really kind to one another on a daily basis. Hopes and dreams. I've got my own.